Here at Southwest Airlines, we beat our competition, not our customers. So, if you guys didn't know what that reference was to, I'm talking about that news story that came out a couple years ago. So, what happened was United Airlines had overbooked a flight. And in order for them to compensate for that, they offered vouchers for people who had volunteered to take a other flight that's later in the day or maybe the next day. So the problem was that not enough people volunteered to take the vouchers, but they really needed to get some people off the flight so that they can get more crew members on. They chose this individual named Dr. David Dow, who is a physician, and he needed to board the flight so that he can attend an appointment with a patient the next day. So what ended up happening was that Dr. Dow refused the offer, so they just called security on him and they dragged him off of the flight, and they beat him up pretty badly too. So it's kind of ironic where he's a doctor and now he needs to see a doctor because of United. So this whole story turned out to be a PR nightmare for United, and it's hard for me to feel bad for United just because they've been known for years of bad customer service. In fact, a lot of US airlines are known for having bad customer service. Now, overbooking is actually a pretty common practice in the airline industry just because sometimes people they don't show up for their flight. So if they book 100% of the tickets and some people don't show up, what ends up happening is that they fly a plane that's maybe only 95% full, and then they lose that 5% of seats that are empty. So what airlines would do is that they would tend to overbook. So maybe they would book 105% of the seat capacity, and then if everybody shows up, then they'll just offer vouchers. And some people would obviously take the vouchers because you get a good value out of them, and they would volunteer to go on the next flight. But the problem with this flight was that it was a really busy flight and no one wanted to take the offer. But that certainly doesn't justify them beating somebody up and dragging them off of a flight like that. So I think that United, it just earned a really bad reputation from all of this. And I'm not saying that Southwest doesn't have the same problem. Obviously, they sometimes they overbook too, but at least I've never heard of any story of Southwest beating anybody up and dragging them off of the flight. So that's a bonus for Southwest, I guess. Goes to show you the state of US airlines. Now, as a side note, I'm going to be referring to American Airlines as the company and US Airlines as just generally any airline that's based off of the US, just because of the naming thing, because American Airlines is called American Airlines. But when I say American Airlines, some people might get confused as to whether I mean American Airlines the company or American Airlines like in general. So I'm going to be talking about US Airlines for the in general for the national airlines, and then I'm going to be talking about American Airlines for American Airlines, the company. Now, the reason why I think Southwest Airlines is the best US airline and why I love Southwest the most, you get it because their ticker symbol is LUV, LUV. Anyways, so the reason why I love Southwest Airlines the most is because I think they have the best reputation. Now, maybe I'm an outsider because I'm from Canada and I don't fly within the United States that often. In fact, I think I've been on less than a handful of Southwest Airlines flights in my entire lifetime. So maybe I'm speaking from an outsider perspective. But I think from my perspective, it does seem like Southwest has the best branding and the best reputation out of all the airlines. And the reason why I say that is because whenever I check on, let's say, a Google Flights or an Expedia or any of these travel booking websites, I never see any results for Southwest Airlines. And the reason why I've heard why that is the case, now I'm not sure, I've only been hearing secondhand information from other people, but the reason that I've heard is because Southwest Airlines actually has their own website and their own travel booking service. So they don't really rely on these services like Expedia or Google Flights or anything else for them to book travel. So I think the fact that they're able to conduct their business without relying on any of these really popular travel sites just goes to show that Southwest actually has a lot of branding power behind them. And they also have a lot of pricing power, right? So I think air travel is sort of being commoditized these days. And being a commodity, you just go for the lowest price possible, right? So whatever airline has the lowest price, you just go for that. But I think for some customers, maybe they would be willing to pay a little bit more if it's a Southwest airline versus like a United, right? Just because United is just known for having such a bad service. Now, I know I'm picking on United, but I think a lot of the other airlines like Delta or American Airlines or, God forbid, Spirit, has similarly bad reputations, right? And I think maybe Southwest has one of the better ones. Southwest and JetBlue are the better ones. So I've heard. I'm not sure. Again, I'm an outsider from Canada, right? So what do I know? But what I can tell you for sure is that Southwest has one of the best balance sheet out of all the major US airlines. So if you look at their balance sheet, they actually have $4 billion in cash and $4 billion in total debts. So they have the same amount of cash as they do total debts. And I assume that this information is slightly outdated because a few weeks ago we just got the news that Southwest is being bailed out by the government. Now, in my opinion, maybe they don't even need to be bailed out just because their balance sheet is so strong amid all the chaos that's going on in the travel industry. But it's nice to see that Southwest is not being ignored by the government, and their balance sheet will only become stronger after this bailout. So the details of the bailout are as follows. So they're getting $3.2 billion in a mixture of loans and grants. Now there's going to be a 70-30 split between grants and loans, which means that 70% is going to be grants and 30% is going to be loans, which they will have to pay back. So it's going to be roughly $1 billion out of the $3.2 billion that I just mentioned will have to be paid back at a later date. But that means that they get to keep another $2.2 billion. Now, I'm not going to go into the politics of whether or not I think it's right that the government should bail out the airline industry or the travel industry. That's up for you to debate, and that's for you to decide. I'm not going to go too much into politics in this channel because I know that ignites a lot of controversy. But what I will say is that this puts Southwest in a very strong competitive position compared to all the other airlines. So if you look at the balance sheet of Southwest versus a lot of other balance sheets from other US airlines, namely American Airlines, like, oh God, I would be really concerned if I was an American airline shareholder. I'll tell you that. It's not looking good for American Airlines in terms of their balance sheet. So it's going to take American Airlines a while for them to pay back their debts. So if you're an American Airlines shareholder, maybe I would be slightly concerned at this point, even despite the fact that they're being bailed out. But if I was a Southwest shareholder, which I am not currently, but I will be thinking about picking up some shares maybe in the future, if the price goes low enough. So I'll talk about that in a sec. But if I was a Southwest Airlines shareholder, I would be relatively relaxed at this moment, seeing that I think that they have a high chance of making it out of this crisis just fine. And not to mention that Southwest has a decent dividend payout as well. So the dividend yield is pretty low, coming in at only 2.1%. But if you look at their long-term growth history, they've grown their dividend for 8 years continuously, and their payout ratio is incredibly low at only 17%. So I know in the travel industry these days, they're all going through a tough time, right? So a lot of travel stocks are cutting their dividends completely, or just at least reducing them. But since the payout ratio from Southwest is so low, there's a chance that they wouldn't have to cut it, or at least even if they cut it, they wouldn't have to cut it completely. I mean, I guess at this point, if you're a dividend investor and you're looking for safe dividends, you shouldn't be looking at any stocks in the travel industry. So if I buy into Southwest stock, I'm not really considering the dividend as a factor anyways. These days, if I'm looking at any travel stocks, I'm just assuming that the dividend is going to be zero in the short term. So I'm not concerned about the dividend at all. But hey, if you're a dividend investor, maybe Southwest could be something that you could look at as well, even though that the dividend might not be as safe as some other companies like, I don't know, Procter & Gamble or Walmart or something like that. They could potentially keep the dividend or maybe even grow it despite all the chaos that's going on. Now, unfortunately, I would be amiss if I didn't tell you about the biggest issue besides the whole Roni situation that's going on right now concerning Southwest. And the other situation is the grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX. And now Southwest has been disproportionately impacted by the whole 737 MAX crisis. And this is only because they're actually the biggest operator of 737 MAX jets in the US. So that's a bit of a knock against Southwest, I guess. They have 34 jets that are currently being grounded. And they have hundreds of orders more that are either going to probably be delayed, or at least even if they're delivered, they wouldn't be able to fly them because they're currently grounded. Now, granted, this is not Southwest's fault because it's Boeing's fault, right? Boeing needs to get their shit together, for a lack of a better term. But Southwest is being dragged into all of this. But I think in the long term, Southwest should be able to come out of this fine. The 737 MAX jet is a very important product to Boeing. So I think that Boeing has just invested too much of their money into this project to let it fail or just cancel it completely or anything even remotely close to that. So Boeing is not going to let the 737 MAX project fail. So you can bet everything that Boeing is going to try their absolute hardest to get this plane certified as fast as possible so that they can get this plane back in the air and not grounded anymore. So we'll have to see how that plays out and if the Roni situation is affecting their timelines. But I think in the long term, I do believe that Boeing will be able to certify their plane properly again and get the planes off in the air once again. Yeah, so in my opinion, looking at all the US airlines, I like Southwest the best. And I think that if you're looking to buy any travel stocks, maybe look at Southwest. And as you probably know, the stock market has bounced back quite a bit from its bottom back in late March. So at this point, I'm not really rushing out to buy any stocks just because I think that the market has gone up too much too fast. We probably will see some sort of correction in the near future. So the reason why I haven't bought into companies like Southwest and everything is just because I'm watching on the sideline and loading up on cash and just waiting for the correct opportunity. But I think that if the market does correct again, then you'll have an opportunity to get into a lot of these stocks that will probably be hammered, and Southwest will probably be one of them. So you might get a buying opportunity soon, but at least at these levels, I'm personally not rushing out to buy any Southwest stock. But this is definitely a stock that I'm watching very closely and would definitely be interested in picking up some shares if the price goes lower. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. Be sure to hit the like button if you like this video and subscribe if you like the series. Feel free to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, links down in the description as always. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.